Now, let me just say this also about the employees. They hire their own employees for each board. And these are supposed to be professionals that are to be advisors. Like, you know, if I'm a board member and you all here are just part of the staff, we're going to rely on your expertise to guide us in what we should or should not be investing in. Because that's your role. That's what you're getting paid to do. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what's their background? Who are they connected to? What's going on here? Because who in their right mind would be investing in that many groups? Who's advising the board to invest shotgun approach? I think to myself, something doesn't sit right there. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Why is the board allowing that to happen? And who's guiding them that way? So, I mean, those are the kind of questions I'd like for DePasquale and maybe Kathy Kane to fire at these boards. We want some answers. Or the General Assembly, who has members sitting on these boards. You know, I'd love to be sitting on one of those boards. They'd want to ride me out of the town on a rail, because when I was on the Ben Franklin Partnership, I used to poke at the business community. We're giving you $5 million to expand your business. I want to see how many more employees you've hired. Well, that's the whole purpose, Tom. You know, we're going to hire employees. And then when I kept poking at that, it started to get a little embarrassing. We were finding out, well, I didn't serve more than a couple terms. I was a thorn. I asked too many questions. But there's somebody that, yes, sir?
Yeah, another question, another side of the problem. There's also the structure of the pension plan itself. Again, is that something that also should be reviewed?
You know, what we looked at, the vast majority of people, both, especially with the state, I'm not too sure about the school districts, but with the state specifically, they're not all making tremendous pensions. They aren't, because they weren't making tremendous salaries. With the vast majority of the old retirees, they were at the lower level. I mean, they weren't making $50, $60, $80, $100,000 a year. They might have retired at 20, 25, 30, 35,000. So they're not getting those kind of pensions. They were probably a half or a third of that. And then made up with Social Security, of course, like almost everybody else gets. Teachers, it could be somewhat different. I guess the older teachers probably went on at a much lower rate of income than the newer teachers that are starting out. But the other fallacy that I found is they keep saying, well, the bottom's going to drop out the bottom. But they base it on the fact that everybody's going to retire at one time. And I think, that ain't going to happen. People are going to continue to work, both at the state and the school districts. Why do they paint the darkest possible picture when they come out with these statements? It's totally underfunded. It cannot be sustained. Well, what are you basing it on? Well, we owe everybody in this room a pension, and we've got to have that money there. Well, you all ain't going to retire at the same time. I mean, chronologically, let's look at the statistics, you know, as to how that's all going to fall into play. Yes, sir.
I've worked in public or private sector most of my career. Last company I worked for was a public company, and after I was vested, probably 2 years after I was vested, they froze the pension plan. Sorry, no more pension. You're going into a 401k. No choice. Mm-hmm. You dealt with it. This is the way it is. This is what the company does. You don't like it? Too bad. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of legislation, but when they did that 401k plan, they had several brokers come in, and they picked whatever gave the best deal. I'm not a big fan of legislation, but if you're going to legislate, why can't it be legislated that you have one company do that, you have a bidding process?
I agree.
And you have maybe a 3-year or a 5-year contract, and whoever comes in with the lowest rate charge gets the business.
I don't disagree with you at all. The most frustrating thing that I found in serving in the legislature is that you would think that common sense would prevail, and it doesn't always. The other thing that too many times you have the leaders of both parties getting in bed, not literally, but you know, and we get it on the chin, you know, it's take it or leave it. They come up with that attitude, and you sometimes think, what the hell is going on here, you know? They mix this stuff up that it just gets so darn confusing. Sometimes members don't know which way to vote on an issue because they muddy the waters. I'll give you one good example real quick. Preemption, all right? That the state will preempt any local municipality as it concerns guns. Now the legislature and the leaders, most of them are attorneys, they know better. You don't mix apples and oranges. Well, we passed a metals bill, a theft of metals bill out of the Judiciary Committee, of which I'm Democratic chairman. That was a standalone issue because of the thefts that are going on with copper. You know how they're tearing out all the metals and the wiring. And all right, we increased the penalty. Well, here we go. What did somebody offer on the floor of the House? Well, the state will have preemption over all the municipalities, whether it's Allentown, Reading, Philadelphia, that you can't pass laws dealing with anything dealing with guns. Well, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be challenged in the courts, and the courts have ruled on this before, similar type issues. You can't put two different issues into one bill. They have to stand alone. And I'm thinking, why did the NRA think, put a bill up there, get that bill out dealing with just preemption, and be done with it? Well, they didn't. So that's going to be challenged. And here we go again, spinning wheels. That preemption nonsense is probably going to be struck down by the courts. Why? Because you put it on a bill that had nothing to do with preemption. It had something to do with metals. Period. So, you know, this is what goes on up there sometimes, and you just shake your head in amazement. You think, just like with these issues we're dealing with here tonight, common sense should prevail, right? Right. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering what the point of action is. What are you going to do?
I'm going to try to, first of all, this guy's been like a lieutenant with me throughout this whole battle. He's a conservative Republican. God knows I'm going to need his help reaching out to Republicans in the legislature, and hopefully we can build an alliance like we did with the property tax. This should not be a deer in our issue. It is not that kind of an issue. We should pull together, look at what we need to do, implement the recommendations that Jack had issued way back when. I think most of it's still relevant. I have my attorneys reviewing this right now with DePasquale's people to find out how much of this has really been implemented. And I think what we found out already is none of it. Now, can I do it legislatively? I'm going to try. If I need to get, and I've said this, I don't care about pride of authorship. If you're a Republican and you're in the majority, as it is now, I'll craft the legislation and I'll give it to you and I'll go on as a co-sponsor. You might have a better chance of getting it through than I would. I don't care. I just want to get the job done. And I've done that on numerous occasions. This closing of the Delaware loophole, as an example, I talked to Jimmy Cox about this just yesterday. I said, Jimmy, I'm going to craft a piece of legislation. I want to give it to you as a football. Would you want to run with it? What does it do? Well, if we close the Delaware loophole, and whatever monies we take in from the corporations that now have to pay it into Pennsylvania, let's reduce our corporate net income tax, which is the highest in the state, from 9.9, maybe down to 4.5 or 4. Sounds like a plan. Kill two birds with one stone. Close the loophole, but dedicate that money to go into reducing our corporate net income tax so it's not the highest, maybe it's one of the lowest, to attract businesses. We're open and ready to do business. Maybe it makes sense. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I understand your plan of action as defined here tonight.
Yes.
Is you're dependent on us to get to our state senators and our state reps.
If you could
to keep
help.
pressing this issue. But, and I agree with that. And another thing that I cannot get past the idea that these people who were overseeing these pension plans had a fiduciary legal responsibility. That
Right.
money, even no matter what you do to fix this, that money still needs to be brought back, repatriated back into the funds. And if the Attorney General or somebody needs to take some action to try and do that.
Well, I think what Richard is pointing out, with the market doing so well right now, the S&P and indexing, suggestions, I think solid suggestions that this man has made, could we start to get out of the hole? I think so. You're talking about 25 billion and 50 billion. That's a lot of money.
Every hole.
Yeah, I mean, how much time would it take? I don't know. Some of you people in here probably are a lot smarter than I about how much time it might take to double or triple that money. I don't know. But I think we ought to go on that path and stop the nonsense that we've been fooling around with.
I would ask you, though, as one
Yes,
of the
sir.
leaders in the House, to please do talk to Ms. Kane at the Attorney General's
Oh, I will.
office and Mr. Pasquale.
I will. You have my word on that. I already talked to Gene twice about this.
Try to get it repaid.
Gene is with us. But now you got to remember, we need the help of the Republicans. Are going to be running the show in the House and the Senate. They have 119, we have 84. Forget the politics. Let us just do the right thing here. In the same way in the Senate, it's 30 to 20. I don't care about the politics. We got to address this, or it's going to come back to haunt us in our property taxes, maybe our income taxes, God knows what else. There'll be legal fights and who wants.
Florida.
My two sons and their families did go to Naples, Florida, just this past year. Thank you. So I do know the feeling.
Just a couple of thoughts there. You had mentioned the 401k, how to set it up. Actually, I am working on a program for that I am going to give to Tom, Tovad, and all of that. But what I'm putting in it is safeguards for the employees from the legislators. I don't want the legislators or this board involved at all in the 401k. I want them to have
Amen.
no say. They've convinced me that they don't know how to handle anything.
Right.
So I don't want them involved in it at all. And the investments, I want to be done on what I call the 10-10 plan. In other words, if you look at a particular group, say the growth market in the country, so you look at all the growth funds, we go back 10 years, and they need to be in the top 10 all 10 years. Or if you do global income, or growth in income, the one that is in the top 10 over the last 10 years are the ones that's picked. You take the top producing in each class, and that's what goes in there. So it can't be done by one fund. You can't hire a Fidelity to do this, or an Oppenheimer to do this, because they don't have the #1 funds in all the classes. So what you need is an administrator separate from the mutual funds, where they allow all the top mutual funds to be in the plan. Okay? That can be set up. It's not hard to set up, but I guarantee you a lot of the legislators are not going to like what I'm going to say, because they won't be able to get their fingers in the mix. Okay? Another question?
So it seems like, the 401k plan, I think, in my opinion, the biggest problem is that the whole thing is centralized. I worked for a company with about 26 people, and we had access to a 401k. Why can't, if a 401k is implemented, why can't it be decentralized to have each department or each department have their own 401k and run them independently. Well, if you if I was in a company that was 25 people, I mean, how could they afford it? You know, that's.
The expenses are higher. The more people you have in it, the expenses go down. So by pulling the.
Use the mic, please.
One.
The mic.
But it seems like they actually go up when it's centralized because they're losing money, right? That was the whole point of your talk, right? Was that they're losing money. I think the problem is that it's centralized.
No, actually what happens is, as you keep the plan, the more people you get into the plan, you can negotiate to get the cost reduced. You can get the expenses reduced each and every year based on size. Okay? But most of the plans like you're talking about goes and you sign up with a company. Maybe Wells Fargo. Okay? It may be Fidelity. But then you only have the option of what they want to put in there. And I want the options to be the best in every sector. Not just one company. And if that company doesn't produce, 3 years from now we reevaluate. If they're not in the top 10 in the last 3 years, guess what? You're out of here. Okay? And there's going to be no fees to get out of it. Okay? And we want the 401k set up simple. We want to keep the costs down. The employees today can't borrow off their pensions, can they? No. So you don't put a borrowing feature in the 401k. Now you've reduced the cost. Okay? Any little bell and whistle that you add to 401ks drives up the cost. So the lower the cost, the better for the client. Okay? And another thing I really recommend about 401ks over defined pension, and I'm going to use my father-in-law as an example. He worked for the state. He retired. He got his check. He died. Guess what happened to his money? It died too. My mother-in-law got nothing. And he did not receive the money that he put in himself, let alone any interest.
That's an insurance distribution.
That's another reason I recommend a 401k. If you have a 401k, you pass away, it goes to your spouse. Either way. The spouse passes away, guess who gets the money? The kids. And that's exactly what the federal legislators did for themselves. And if it's good enough for the federal legislators, it's good enough for all of us. That's my feeling about that. We need to get the word out as much as we can to help each other. And as Tom was saying, we do need your help. The leadership in Harrisburg is going to oppose this. And they're going to oppose it big time. Because they're getting the money from, major money from the investment bankers. And the investment bankers are going to want to continue paying these commissions. So we need your help. Go to your legislators. Beat them up. If they say anything isn't true, tell them to call Tom Caltagirone. He's on board. Okay? Give him my name. I'll call him. I'll meet with him. But we've got to get this done. This is one of the things that's killing us on properties, our property tax. It's killing us. We've got to stop that. We've got to have 76 pass. 76 would fix this, by the way. If 76 would pass, this would end. So would the interest swaps. And we've got to get an end to that. So let's work together and get this done. I'm going to stick around. I'll answer any questions. May God bless and have a safe trip home.
Whose brain? Abby someone. Abby someone. Abby who? Abby normal.